Chapter 1. A Most Peculiar Inheritance. In the quaint village of St. Mary Mead, where gossip flowed like afternoon tea, Miss Jane Marple's serene existence shattered one foggy autumn morning. A letter arrived, its envelope sealed with crimson wax bearing an arcane symbol, a twisted serpent devouring its tail. The sender? Professor Elias Thornwood, a reclusive scholar whose name evoked whispers of forbidden knowledge and shadowy experiments. Dead now, or so the postmark claimed, yet his words leaped from the page like a predator in the night. "Dear Miss Marple," it began in spidery script that clawed at the paper. "In my final hours I bequeath to you Willowbrook Cottage, nestled in the cursed hollows of Eldridge Moor. Beware its secrets, they whisper of treachery and untimely ends. Accept this inheritance, if you dare, and unravel what devoured my soul." Intrigue ignited in Miss Marple's sharp blue eyes. Eccentric? Thornwood was a mad genius, rumored to dabble in alchemy and ancient curses. Why her? A distant acquaintance from a long-ago garden party, where he'd ranted about hidden realms. She folded the letter, her knitting needles clicking like a countdown to doom. "Most peculiar," she murmured, but curiosity, that insatiable beast, propelled her toward the Whodunit. The journey to Eldridge Moor was a descent into nightmare. The train rattled through storm-lashed countryside, where skeletal trees clawed at the sky like desperate fingers. A horse-drawn carriage awaited at the station, driven by a hunched figure named Grimshaw, whose face resembled weathered granite. "Ye shouldn't go, miss," he growled, his voice a gravelly omen. "That cottage, it eats folk alive." Miss Marple smiled politely, her mind already weaving threads of suspicion. Willowbrook loomed at dusk, a crooked silhouette against blood-red clouds. Ivy strangled its stone walls, windows like hollow eyes staring back. The door creaked open on rusted hinges, exhaling a musty breath laced with decay. Inside, dust motes danced in flickering candlelit, revealing Thornwood's lair. Shelves groaning under tomes of occult lore, a desk strewn with yellowed maps pinpointing ley lines and forgotten graves. A portrait of the professor glared down, his eyes seeming to follow her every step. That first night, terror struck like lightning dot Miss Marple settled by the fire, sipping chamomile to steady her nerves, when a low moan echoed from the walls. Not Wayne something guttural, alive. Shadows twisted unnaturally, forming shapes that slithered across the floor. She rose, heart pounding, and traced the sound to the cellar door, bolted with iron kinds etched in strange runes. "Professor Thornwood," she whispered, "what horrors did you unleash?" Descending the stairs, her candle flame guttering an icy draught, she discovered a hidden chamber. Alchemical apparatus bubbled with iridescent liquids, and on a pedestal sat a leather-bound journal, its pages pulsing with forbidden revelations. Entry spoke of a family curse. Thornwood's ancestors had unearthed an ancient artifact, obsidian amulet said to summon vengeful spirits. Greed consummate them. One by one they vanished, their screams etched into the cottage's very bones. But white footsteps thudded above. Miss Marple froze, extinguishing her light. A figure emerged from the gloom. Grimshaw, the carriage driver, wielding a gleaming dagger. "The amulet's mine," Hess snarled, eyes wild with avarice. "Thornwood promised it, but ye've meddled." In that pulse-racing moment, Miss Marple's keen intellect flashed. The letter's wax seal, the serpent, was no mere emblem. It matched Grimshaw's ring. Thornwood hadn't died naturally. This brute had poisoned him, staging the inheritance to lure a witness. "You underestimated an old lady's intuition," she said calmly, her voice cutting like steel. A scuffle ensued. Grimshaw lunged, but Miss Marple sidestepped, toppling a shelf of vials. Acidic fumes erupted, choking the air. He howled, blinded, as she seized the amulet and fled upstairs. Villagers, alerted by her earlier telegram, for Miss Marple always planned ahead, burst in, subduing the villain. Dawn broke over Eldridge Moor, banishing the shadows. The amulet, destroyed in the hearth, released a final sigh like a curse lifting. Miss Marple returned to St. Mary Mead, the cottage sold to unsuspecting buyer. Yet in quiet moments she pondered, had Thornwood truly meant to ensnare her, or gift her one last puzzle? Mysteries, after all, weareth spice of life. Chapter 2. The Cottage by Moonlight. In the velvet shroud off midnight, where shadows clawed at the edges of sanity, Miss Jane Marple stepped off the rattling train onto the fog-choked platform of Eldridge Hollow. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and unspoken dread, as if the very ground whispered warnings to the unwary. Willowmere Cottage awaited her, a crumbling sentinel of stone and secrets, its ivy tendrils writhing like serpents in the pale moonlight. Inherited from the enigmatic Professor Elias Thornwood, whose sudden demise reeked of foul play, this was no ordinary bequest. It was a gauntlet thrown into the abyss of the unknown. As her sensible shoes crunched over gravel paths, twisted like veins in a dying leaf, Miss Marple's keen eyes pierced the gloom. The village of Eldridge Hollow slumbered uneasily, its thatched roofs hunched against the night like frightened beasts. Lamplight flickered from a lone tavern, the Blackthorn Inn, where a cluster of locals huddled like conspirators in a Shakespearean tragedy. She pushed open the creaking door, and a hush fell sharper than a guillotine's blade. Eyes wide, wary, and wild turned toward her, appraising this prim old lady with her knitting bag and unyielding gaze. "Ah, the must be the new mistress of Willowmere," growled the innkeeper. A burly man named Hargrove, his face a map of scars and suspicion. He slammed a tankard down, ale frothing like rabid foam. Word travels fast in these parts. But mark me words, Miss turned back now. That cottage devours souls like a beast in the dark. Miss Marple tilted her head, her smile a razor-thin veil over curiosity's fire. "Devours? How dramatic! Pray tell, what tales swirl around my new abode?" The locals erupted in a cacophony of murmurs, voices overlapping like thunderclaps in a storm. A wizened crone with eyes like blackened coals leaned forward, her gnarled finger jabbing the air. "The bed, miss. The cursed bed in the master chamber. No one has ever slept in that infernal cradle and lived to see dawn's light. They say it's haunted by the vengeful spirit of Lady Evelyn, Willowmere herself, murdered in her sleep a century ago by a jealous lover. Her screams echo through the walls, and her icy grip claims any fool who dares close their eyes." A young barmaid, pale as moonlight on marble, shivered violently. "Me own brother tried it on a dare. Woke up, or rather didn't. Found him cold as stone, eyes bulgin' like he'd seen the devil himself." "And the professor? Thornwood?" He laughed at the legends, said it was all poppycock. But we buried him last week, didn't we?" Face twisted in eternal terror. Hargrove nodded gravely, his voice dropping to a gravelly rumble. "Strange marks on his neck, like fingers from the grave. You'd be mad to stay, miss?" "Mad as a hatter in hell." Undeterred, Miss Marple thanked them with polite poise, her mind already spinning webs of deduction. Superstitions were the smoke screens of secrets, and she smelled deceit thicker than the fog outside. As she departed into the night, the villagers' warnings trailed her like ghosts, whispers of doom that only fueled her resolve. The path to Willowmere wound through ancient woods, where branches twisted into grotesque shapes, clawing at the sky as if begging for mercy. Moonlight filtered through leaves like shattered glass, casting eerie patterns that danced mockingly at her feet. The cottage emerged suddenly, a hulking beast of weathered stone, its windows gaping maws that swallowed light whole. Ivy strangled the walls in a death grip, blooms of blood-red flowers dripping like wounds in the night. The key turned with a reluctant groan, and the door swung inward on hinges that screamed protest. Inside, dust motes swirled in the beam of her lantern, revealing a foyer frozen in time. Cobwebs draped like funeral veils over antique furniture, and the air tasted of mildew and malice. Miss Marple's footsteps echoed hollowly as she explored, her knitting needles clicking in her bag like a metronome of impending peril. The parlor was a shrine to eccentricity, shelves buckling under grimoires of arcane lore. A grandfather clock frozen at midnight, its hands bent as if by unseen force. Portraits lined the walls, stern faces with eyes that followed her, their gazes accusatory and alive. One depicted Lady Evelyn, her beauty a fragile facade over haunted hollows. "What secrets do you guard?" Miss Marple murmured, tracing the frame with a gloved finger. Upstairs, the master chamber beckoned like a siren's call. The bed dominated a four-poster monstrosity carved with serpentine motifs, its canopy sagging like a predator's jaw. Crimson drapes billowed in a draught from nowhere, and the mattress seemed to pulse faintly, as if breathing. She approached warily, her heart thumping a staccato rhythm. The linens were pristine, unnaturally so, but a faint stain marred the pillow, a shadow that hinted at horrors past dot as night deepened. The cottage came alive with sinister symphony. Floorboards creaked without cause, winds howled through sealed chimneys, and distant moans slithered from the walls like venomous snakes. Miss Marple settled into an armchair by the fire, her eyes sharp as daggers, refusing the bed's deadly embrace. Sleep was a luxury for the foolish. Vigilance was her armor. Hours ticked by in torturous slowness. Midnight struck not from the clock, but from some infernal toll that vibrated through her bones. Suddenly a chill descended, frost rimming the windows in fractal patterns of fear. The moans crescendoed into wails, and shadows coalesced into a spectral form at the bed's foot, a translucent woman in Victorian gown, her neck bruised with phantom fingerprints. "Lady Evelyn?" Miss Marple whispered, unflinching. The apparition pointed accusingly, her mouth agape in silent scream. Then, as abruptly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving only a whisper. "Beware the Betrayer. Dawn's first blush pierced the curtains, but Miss Marple had not slept. She rose, invigorated by the puzzle's pieces falling into place. The villagers' tales were laced with truth, but twisted by lies. Thornwood's death certificate, tucked in her bag from prior inquiries, listed asphyxiation not supernatural, but suspiciously mundane. Venturing into the village under morning's pallid light, she sought Hargrove at the inn. He greeted her with feigned surprise, his eyes darting like cornered prey. "They survived the night? Miracles do happen." "Indeed," she replied sweetly. "But tell me, Mr. Hargrove, why did you warn me so vehemently? And what of the professor's research? He delved into Willowmere's history, didn't he?" Hargrove's face paled, sweat beading like guilty confessions. "Nothing to tell. Old fool meddled where he shouldn't." Pressing further, Miss Marple visited the local graveyard, where tombstones leaned like drunken sentinels. Lady Evelyn's grave was overgrown, but fresh footprints marred the soil boots matching Hargrove's. A hidden diary unearthed from the cottage revealed Thornwood's discoveries. Lady Evelyn hadn't been murdered by a lover, but poisoned by her brother for inheritance. The curse was a cover for generations of greed-driven killings. Back at Willowmere, tension coiled like a spring. Evening fell with brutal swiftness, moonlight bathing the cottage in ethereal glow. Miss Marple feigned sleep in the cursed bed, her senses alert as a hawk's. Midnight approached, and with it, stealthy footsteps on the stairs. The door creaked open, revealing Hargrove, a vial of poison glinting in his hand. "You should have heeded the warnings, old bat," he snarled, advancing like a wolf on wounded prey. "The bed's curse is me preserving the family secret. Thornwood found out, and now you." In a flash of insight, Miss Marple connected the dots. Hargrove was a descendant, the betrayer Evelyn warned of in spectral guise. But she was no helpless victim. With a swift motion, she triggered a hidden bell wired earlier to alert the constable. Summoned by telegram, Hargrove lunged, but she rolled aside, the vial shattering on the floor in acrid fumes. He choked, clutching his throat as authorities burst in. Irons clanging like justice's hammer. The curse shattered with Hargrove's confession. Staged hauntings. Secret passages and poison to claim Willowmere's hidden fortune, a cache of jewels buried beneath. Lady Evelyn's ghost was a projection. Thornwood's death a calculated murdered dot as dawn gilded the hollow. Miss Marple departed, the cottage's shadows banished. Eldridge Hollow breathed easier, its whispers now of gratitude. Yet in her quiet St. Mary Mead home, she pondered, how many curses hid human malice? Mysteries, after all, were the heartbeat of existence pulsing, perilous, and profoundly alive dot in the velvet shroud of midnight, where shadows clawed at the edges of sanity. Miss Jane Marple stepped off the rattling train onto the fog-choked platform of Eldridge Hollow. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and unspoken dread, as if the very ground whispered warnings to the unwary. Willowmere Cottage awaited her, crumbling sentinel of stone and secrets, its ivy tendrils writhing like serpents in the pale moonlight. Inherited from the enigmatic Professor Elias Thornwood, whose sudden demise reeked of foul play, this was no ordinary bequest. It was a gauntlet thrown into the abyss of the unknown. The letter that had summoned her here burned in her pocket, its words etched in her memory. Unravel the darkness, or be consumed by it. As her sensible shoes crunched over gravel paths, twisted like veins in a dying leaf, Miss Marple's keen eyes pierced the gloom. The village of Eldridge Hollow slumbered uneasily, its thatched roofs hunched against the night like frightened beasts. Lamplight flickered from a lone tavern, the Blackthorn Inn, where a cluster of locals huddled like conspirators in a Shakespearean tragedy. She pushed open the creaking door, and a hush fell sharper than a guillotine's blade. Eyes wide, wary, and wild turned toward her, appraising this prim old lady with her knitting bag and unyielding gaze. The room smelled of peat smoke and fear, a potent brew that set her instincts ablaze. "Ah, the must be the new mistress of Willowmere," growled the innkeeper. A burly man named Hargrove, his face a map of scars and suspicion. He slammed a tankard down, ale frothing like rabid foam. Word travels fast in these parts. But mark me words, Miss turned back now. That cottage devours souls like a beast in the dark. The winds howl with the cries of the damned, and the walls bleed with memories of murder. Miss Marple tilted her head, her smile a razor-thin veil over curiosity's fire. "Devours? How dramatic! Pray tell, what tales swirl around my new abode? I do so love a good story. It's like knitting a scarf from threads of truth and tall tales." The locals erupted in a cacophony of murmurs, voices overlapping like thunderclaps in a storm. A wizened crone with eyes like blackened coals leaned forward, her gnarled finger jabbing the air like a dagger. "The bed, miss. The cursed bed in the master chamber. No one has ever slept in that infernal cradle and lived to see dawn's light. They say it's haunted by the vengeful spirit of Lady Evelyn, Willowmere herself murdered in her sleep a century ago by a jealous lover. Her screams echo through the walls, shredding the night, and her icy grip claims any fool who dares close their eyes. Blood on the sheets, marks on the throat, death's cold kiss." A young barmaid, pale as moonlight on marble, shivered violently, her hands trembling as she clutched her apron. "Me own brother tried it on a dare, thinking he was brave as a lion. Woke up, or rather, didn't. Found him cold as stone, eyes bulging like he'd seen the devil himself clawing out from hell. Skin blue, fingers twisted in agony. And the professor? Thornwood? He laughed at the legends, said it was all poppycock from superstitious fools. But we buried him last week, didn't we?" Face twisted in eternal terror, as if the grave itself rejected him. Hargrove nodded gravely, his voice dropping to a gravelly rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Strange marks on his neck, like fingers from the grave squeezing the life out. Whispers say the bed feeds on fear, growing stronger with each victim. "You'd be mad to stay, miss. Mad as a hatter in hell's own tea party. Take the next train out before the moon rises full and the curse awakens hungry." Another villager, a lanky farmer with dirt-caked hands, chimed in, his voice quaking. "I saw at once lights dancing in the windows, like souls trapped in eternal torment. Heard the laughter, too, mad and mocking. Stay away, I beg thee." Undeterred, Miss Marple thanked them with polite poise, her mind already spinning webs of deduction. Superstitions were the smoke screens of secrets, and she smelled deceit thicker than the fog outside. The villagers' eyes held more than fear. Guilt flickered in their depths, like embers in a dying fire. As she departed into the night, the warnings trailed her like ghost whispers of doom that only fueled her resolve. The moon hung low, a silver scythe reaping stars from the sky. Illuminating her path with treacherous light, the trail to Willowmere wound through ancient woods where branches twisted into grotesque shapes, clawing at the sky as if begging for mercy from an uncaring God. Leaves rustled like conspiratorial whispers, and distant owls hooted omens of misfortune. Moonlight filtered through the canopy like shattered glass, casting eerie patterns that danced mockingly at her feet, shifting into faces of the dead. Every step echoed, amplified by the silence, as if the forest itself held its breath in anticipation. Willowmere emerged suddenly from the mist, a hulking beast of weathered stone, its silhouette jagged against the night sky like a monster risen from nightmares. Ivy strangled the walls in a death grip, its tendrils thick as ropes, blooming with blood-red flowers that dripped dew like fresh wounds. The roof sagged under the weight of years, tiles missing like teeth in a snarling maw. Windows gaped like empty eye sockets, dark and unblinking, promising horrors within. The key, cold as ice in her hand, turned with a reluctant groan, and the door swung inward on hinges that screamed in protest, a wail that pierced the soul. Inside, dust motes swirled in the beam of her lantern like lost spirits, revealing a foyer frozen in time. Cobwebs draped like funeral veils over antique furniture, and the air tasted of mildew, decay, and something sharper malice, pure and potent. Miss Marple's footsteps echoed hollowly as she explored, her knitting needles clicking in her bag like a metronome of impending peril, a reminder that even in chaos, order could be woven. The parlor was a shrine to eccentricity, shelves buckling under grimoires of arcane lore, pages yellowed with age and stained with unknown substances. A grandfather clock stood sentinel, frozen at midnight, its hands bent as if by an invisible force trying to halt time itself. Portraits lined the walls, stern faces with eyes that followed her movements, their gazes accusatory and alarmingly alive, as if judging her intrusion. One depicted Lady Evelyn Willowmere, her beauty a fragile facade over haunted hollows, lips curved in a smile that hid screams. "What secrets do you guard, my dear?" Miss Marple murmured, tracing the frame with a gloved finger, feeling a chill seep through the fabric. A faint scent of lavender lingered, clashing with the wrought a ghost of femininity in this tomb of terror. She moved to the kitchen, where rusted pots hung like nooses, and a table bore scratches as if from desperate nails. Upstairs the master chamber beckoned like a siren's call to shipwreck. The bed dominated the room, a four-poster monstrosity, carved with serpentine motifs that seemed to writhe in the lantern light, its canopy sagging like a predator's jaw ready to snap shut. Crimson drapes billowed in a draught from nowhere, whispering invitations to doom. The mattress seemed to pulse faintly, as if breathing with malevolent life, and a faint stain marred the pillow, a shadow that hinted at horrors past. Blood long dried, but never forgotten dot as night deepened into an inky abyss. The cottage came alive with a sinister symphony that assaulted the senses. Floorboards creaked without cause, as if invisible feet paced in agitation. Wings howled through sealed chimneys, carrying echoes of distant cries. Distant moans slithered from the walls like venomous snakes coiling for the strike. Miss Marple settled into an armchair by the crackling fire, her eyes sharp as daggers, refusing the bed's deadly embrace. Sleep was a luxury for the foolish. Vigilance was her armor against the encroaching darkness. She knitted methodically, each stitch a thread in the tapestry of truth she was unraveling. Hours ticked by in torturous slowness, the clock's silence mocking the passage of time. Midnight struck not from the frozen grandfather, but from some infernal toll that vibrated through her bones, shaking the foundations of reality. Suddenly a chill descended like a blanket of ice, frost rimming the windows in fractal patterns of fear that crawled like spiders across the glass. The moans crescendoed into blood-curdling wails that pierced the eardrums, and shadows coalesced into a spectral form at the bed's foot, a translucent woman in a flowing Victorian gown, her neck bruised with phantom fingerprints that pulsed with unearthly light. "Lady Evelyn?" Miss Marple whispered, her voice steady despite the terror gripping her heart. The apparition pointed accusingly, her mouth agape in a silent scream that somehow echoed in Miss Marple's mind. Eyes hollow as graves bored into her soul, conveying anguish and urgency. Then, as abruptly as it appeared, it vanished in a swirl of mist, leaving only a lingering whisper that hung in the air. "Beware the betrayer. He comes with poison's kiss, ... The room warmed slightly, but the warning lingered like a noose around her neck. Dawn's first blush pierced the curtains, painting the room in hues of hope, but Miss Marple had not slept a wink. She rose, invigorated by the puzzle's pieces falling into place like dominoes in a deadly game. The villagers' tales were laced with truth, but twisted by lies woven to conceal crimes. Thornwood's death certificate, tucked in her bag from prior inquiries via discreet letters, listed asphyxiation not supernatural, but suspiciously mundane, with notes of unusual toxins, venturing into the village under morning's pallid light. Where dew glistened like tears on the grass, she sought Hargrove at the inn. He greeted her with feigned surprise, his eyes darting like cornered prey in a hunter's sights. "Survived the night? Miracles do happen in these God-forsaken parts." "Indeed," she replied sweetly, her tone laced with steel. "But tell me, Mr. Hargrove, why did you warn me so vehemently? And what of the professor's research? He delved into Willowmere's history, didn't he? Unearthed family trees that branch into your own, perhaps?" Hargrove's face paled to the color of ash, sweat beading like guilty confessions on his brow. "Nothing to tell. Old fool meddled where he shouldn't. Ghosts don't like prying eyes." But Miss Marple pressed, her questions sharp as scalpels dissecting deception. She visited the local graveyard, where tombstones leaned like drunken sentinels under weeping willows. Lady Evelyn's grave was overgrown with thorns that drew blood from careless fingers, but fresh footprints marred the soft soil boots matching Hargrove's heavy tread. Digging subtly with a borrowed trowel, she unearthed a hidden compartment in the monument, a diary bound in cracked leather. Thornwood's handwriting scrawled across pages yellowed by time. The entries revealed a chilling saga. Lady Evelyn hadn't been murdered by a lover, but poisoned by her brother for the family inheritance. A fortune in jewels hidden in the cottage's foundations. The curse was a fabricated legend, perpetuated by descendants to scare away claimants, allowing them to kill and claim without suspicion. Hargrove's name appeared, a distant relative, greedy and ruthless, who had silenced Thornwood when he got too close. Armed with this explosive truth, Miss Marple returned to Willowmere as evening fell with brutal swiftness, the sun plunging behind hills like a fleeing witness. Moonlight bathed the cottage in an ethereal glow, transforming it from monster to melancholy mausoleum. She feigned exhaustion, announcing to a spying villager her intent to brave the bed. But in truth she prepared wiring a hidden bell, to the door, connected by string to alert the constable she'd summoned by urgent telegram earlier that day. As midnight's cloak enveloped the world, tension coiled like a spring ready to snap. The spectral symphony resumed, creaks, howls, moans building to a fever pitch. Then stealthy footsteps on the stairs, soft but betraying a heavy frame. The door creaked open inch by inch, revealing Hargrove's hulking silhouette, a vial of poison glinting ominously in his hand under the moonlight. "Ye should have heeded the warnings. Old bat," he snarled, his voice a guttural growl that echoed like thunder. "The bed's curse is me preserving the family secret for generations. Thornwood found the jewel's map, and now you poke your nose in. Time to join the ghosts." In a flash of crystalline insight, Miss Marple connected the final dots. Hargrove was the betrayer, using stage hauntings via secret passages, projectors hidden in walls, and poison to mimic strangulation. The ghost was his trickery, Thornwood's death a calculated murder to seize the treasure. But she was no helpless victim, no lamb to the slaughter. With a swift, calculated motion, she yanked the string, triggering the bell's clamor. Hargrove lunged like a beast unleashed, his face contorted in rage, but Miss Marple rolled aside with surprising agility, the vial shattering on the floor in a hiss of acrid fumes that burned the air. He choked, clutching his throat as poisonous vapors filled his lungs, his eyes bulging in ironic mimicry of his victims. Doors burst open downstairs. Constables stormed in, lanterns blazing like avenging angels, irons clanging like justice's unrelenting hammer. Hargrove was subdued, sputtering confessions amid coughs, the jewels, the murders, the elaborate ruse to keep Willowmere's wealth in his bloodline. As dawn gilded the hollow with golden promise, banishing the night's terrors, Miss Marple stood amid the chaos, composed as ever. The jewels were unearthed, a glittering hoard that would benefit the village, not one man's greed. Eldridge Hollow breathed easier, its whispers now of gratitude and awe for the unassuming sleuth who shattered the curse. Yet, back in her quiet St. Mary Mead home, amid blooming roses and afternoon teas, Miss Marple pondered over her knitting. How many curses were but veils for human malice, mysteries with a heartbeat of existence pulsing, perilous and profoundly alive, drawing her ever onward into the shadows. Chapter 3. The Bed in the Blue Room. In the heart of Willowmere Cottage, where shadows clung to corners like uninvited guests, Miss Jane Marple's insatiable curiosity led her to a forbidden threshold. The blue room locked tighter than a miser's purse, its key hidden amid Thornwood's chaotic desk drawers, beckoned with an aura of malevolent mystery. Whispers from the villagers echoed in her mind. "Stay away from the blue room, miss. It's a portal to hell itself." But Miss Marple, with her prim demeanor masking a steel-trap intellect, twisted the key in the rusted lock. The door groaned open like a dying beast, exhaling a rush of frigid air, laced with the metallic tang of forgotten fears. Moonlight slashed through grimy windows, painting the room in ethereal sapphire hues that gave it its name. Dust swirled in spectral dances, and there, dominating the space like a throne of torment, stood the bed. Grand and ornate, its mahogany frame twisted into grotesque carvings, gargoyles with leering eyes, vines that seemed to pulse with unholy life, and clawed feet gripping the floorboards, as if ready to pounce. The canopy dripped with faded azure velvet, tattered like the wings of a fallen angel. and the mattress sagged under invisible weight, inviting doom with its plush deception. Miss Marple's breath caught, her hearth undering like war drums in her chest. Legends clawed at her memory. This relic, brought from a cursed Scottish castle, had driven men to madness. Sleep in it, they said, and nightmares would devour your soul visions of blood-soaked battlefields. Lovers turned to monsters, or worse, the abyss staring back with your own face twisted in eternal agony. Thornwood himself had avoided it, sealing the room after one fateful night that left him raving about demons in the sheets. Yet here she was, drawn like a moth to a funeral pyre. As she stepped closer, a chill slithered up her spine, coiling around her like a serpent's embrace. The air grew thick, oppressive, as if the room breathed malice. She traced a finger along the headboard, feeling etchings of ancient runes that hummed faintly under her touch. "What horrors have you witnessed?" she murmured, her voice slicing silence. That night the cottage transformed into a cauldron of terror. Miss Marple, ever the strategist, chose not to tempt fate immediately. Instead, she barricaded herself in the parlor, knitting furiously as winds howled outside like banshees in agony. But sleep evaded her, replacing by creaks and whispers that seeped from the blue room's walls. At midnight's witching hour, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air, not hers, but echoing from above, raw and primal, as if souls were being flayed alive. Compelled by the puzzle's grip, she ascended the stairs, lantern trembling in her grasp. The blue room door, which she'd locked, now stood ajar, yawning like a predator's maw. Inside, the bed seamy daylight sheets rumpled as if recently occupied, a dent in the pillow shaped like a head. Shadows writhed on the walls, forming grotesque tableaux, figures writhing in torment, claws raking flesh. A low growl emanated from beneath Thefram, and Miss Marple's skin prickled with electric dread. "Show yourself," she commanded, her voice steady as a guillotine's fall. In response, the temperature plummeted, frost blooming on mirrors like deadly flowers. Visions assaulted her, flashes off Thornwood's final moments, his body convulsing on that very bed, foam flecking his lips as invisible hands throttled his throat. Madness clawed at her mind, memories not her own, of betrayals and buried secrets, threatening to shatter her sanity. But Miss Marple was no fragile flower. She was a thorn in deception's side. Shaking off the hallucinations, she rummaged through the room's armoire, unearthing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a velvet pouch containing a vial of shimmering liquid, odorless, but labeled Essence of Nightmares in Thornwood's hand. Alchemical notes detailed its creation, a hallucinogenic brew derived from rare fungi, capable of inducing vivid terrors and cardiac arrest in overdose. "Not curses," she whispered triumphantly, "but chemistry's cruel masquerade." Dawn broke like a warrior's blade, banishing night's phantoms. Miss Marple ventured to the village, her steps purposeful amid the mist-shrouded lanes. At the Blackthorn Inn, Hargrove, the burly innkeeper, now exposed as Thornwood's distant kin, eyed her warily. "They look like you've seen ghosts, miss. The blue room got you, they? Ghosts?" "Hardly," she retorted, her eyes piercing like daggers. "But poisons and projections, those are real enow. Tell me, Mr. Hargrove, how did you access the secret passage behind Thebes? The one leading from the cellar, rigged with mirrors and bellows to simulate screams and chills?" His face drained of color, a mask cracking under pressure. "You're mad." The bed's cursed, everyone knows it. Everyone you've terrified into believing, she countered. Piecing clues like a deadly mosaic, she revealeth truth. Hargrove, covetous of Willowmere's hidden jewels, had laced Thebes' linens with the hallucinogen. Thornwood, discovering the plot, had been force-fed a lethal dose during a friendly visit. The curse was Hargrove's invention, amplified by mechanocaltric's hidden pipes for cold draughts, phosphorescent paints for glowing apparitions, and opium-laced incense to fog the mind. Villagers gathered, drawn by the commotion, their faces a storm of shock and fury. Hargrove lunged, a desperate beast cornered, but Miss Marple sidestepped nimbly, her umbrella hooking his ankle. He crashed to the floor, spilling confessions like venom from a viper, Thebes' relic status a fabrication to deter intruders, the nightmaressa tool to eliminate threats. Constables, summoned by her foresight, clapadirons on him, his roars echoing defeat as sunlight bathed Willowmere in golden redemption. Miss Marple stood in the blue room once more. The bed, stripped of its mystique, was just wood and fabric harmless, without human malice. She burned the vial in the hearth, watching flames consume the essence of deception. The jewels, unearthed from beneath the frame, would fund village repairs, turning curse to blessing. Departing Eldridge Hollow, Miss Marple reflected on the fragility of fear. Nightmares weren't born of relics, but Offgrede's dark heart. In St. Mary Mead's tranquil embrace, she resumed her knitting, ever vigilant for the next thread of intrigue. For in the tapestry off-life, mysteries lurked like shadows, waiting to be unraveled by those brave enough to face the abyss. Chapter 4. The Housekeeper's Tale. In the flickering glow of a dying hearth, where embers crackled like brittle bones underfoot, Miss Jane Marple sat transfixed in Willowmere Cottage's dusty parlor. The air hung thick with the scent of lavender and lurking decay, a deceptive veil over the house's venomous secrets. Before her hunched Mrs. Gibbons, the elderly house-ecker, a withered spectre of a woman, her face etched with Ravine's offery, and eyes gleaming like coals in a forgotten mine. Hired by Professor Thornwood in his final frantic days, she had outlasted owners like a grim reaper's shadow. "You've come seeking truths, miss," she croaked, her voice a rusty hinge swinging open to horrors. "But truths here bite like vipers. Sit thee down, and I'll spin the tales of the bed the cursed cradle that devours dreams and spits out corpses." Miss Marple leaned forward. Her knitting needles paused mid-stitch, sharp as interrogators' probes. "Pray, Mrs. Gibbons, enlighten me." The villagers' whisper of tragedies tied to that ornate monstrosity upstairs. Each owner felled by nightmares or worse. Start from the beginning, if you will. The housekeeper's gnarled hands clutched Hurapron like lifelines, her breath ragged as a storm-tossed sea. "Aye, from the beginning it is. Willowmere wasn't always a tomb of terrors. Built in 1789 by Lord Reginald Hawthorne, a man drunk on ambition and darker arts. He brought bed from a raised abbey in the Scottish Highlands. Whispers say it was carved from wood soaked in witches' blood during the trials. Gargoyles leering from the posts, runes twisting like serpents in agony. Lord Hawthorne slept in it once, and never woke, saying." Her eyes widened, pupils swallowing the light like black holes. "The first night he raved of visions, his ancestors sklong from graves, accusing him of stolen fortunes. By morn he was a babbling fool, scratching at his throat as if invisible nooses tightened. Doctors collated apoplexy, but we knew the bed fed on his guilt. He flung himself from Thetower window. 3 days later, body splattered like overripe fruit on Thecouple stones below. His blood stained the drive. Rain couldn't wash it away for weeks. Servants fled, swearing the bed pulsed with unholy life, sheets whispering invitations to doom. Miss Marple's mind whirred like a clockwork enigma, piecing shadows into shapes. Fascinating. And the next unfortunate soul? Mrs. Gibbons leaned in, her whisper slicing Thier like a blade. Lady Victoria Hawthorne, his widow a beauty, with raven hair and a heart black as pitch. Inherited the lot, bed and all. She mocked the Talls, called them peasant prattle. Slept in it to prove her mettle. Oh, the screams that night! Echoed through the hollow like banshees birthing HELLSPAWN. We found her at dawn, eyes bulging like boiled eggs, neck bruised purple as if strangled by ghostly lovers. But no one was there save the bed, its canopiscing smugly. Autopsy said heart failure, but Marks told otherwise. Whispers grew. The bed summoned spirits of the wronged, choking life from Thewicht. A gust rattled the windows, as if the Cottagite self eavesdropped, hungry for more. Miss Marple nodded encouragingly. "Continue, Mrs. Gibbons. These patterns intrigue me like threads in tapestry of treachery." The housekeeper's laugh was a dry cackle, brittle as autumn leaves. "Patterns? Aye, death's own design." Next came Colonel Bertram Finch, a war-hardened brute fresh from colonial slaughters. Bought Willowmere in 1852, seeking peace. The bed lured him like a siren song. First night, he bolted upright, howling of battlefields rising from Thief-sheets ghosts of slain enemies, dragging him to muddy graves. By week's end, he was a trembling wreck, pistol in hand, shooting at shadows. One bullet found his temple. They called it suicide, but I saw the bed indentations like bodies had lain beside him, cold spots lingering like accusing fingerprints. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, suspicion coiling like smoke. Guilt again? Each victim burdened by sins? Burdened? Crushed. Mrs. Gibbons spat, her voice rising to a fevered pitch. "The bed don't just haunt, it judges. Sucks secrets from your soul and twists 'em into nooses. Take Miss Eliza Thornwood, the professor's great-aunt, in 1897, a spinster with a tongue sharp as thorns, hiding a bastard child given away in shame. She claimed the cottage, defiant. Slept in the bed, dreaming of the babe's cries echoing from Thepelos. Woke, clawing her ears, blood streaming. Madness took her swift, drowned herself in the moor's bog, body sucked down like quicksand's kiss. Villagers fished her out, face frozen in eternal shriek. The fire popped, sparks flying like fleeing spirits. Outside, winds moaned through the ivy, mimicking the cries of Thedamd. Miss Marple felt a chill slither down her spine, but her resolve hardened like forged steel. And more? The bed's appetite seems insatiable. Oh, insatiable as the devil's maw. Mrs. Gibbons's hands trembled, tea sloshing from her cup like spilled blood. In 1923 came Reginald Blackwood, a charlatan medium peddling seances to the gullible. Thought he could tame the bed, commune with its spirits. Fool. That night the room shook like an earthquake from hell. He emerged at dawn, hair white as snow, babbling of portals opening in the mattress, demons dragging him to fiery pits. locked himself in the attic, starving to death rather than face it again. Body withered to bones, eyes hollow as the abyss he glimpsed. Miss Marple paused her knitting, threads off deduction weaving tighter. Each tale escalates guilt, ghosts, madness. Yet Professor Thornwood dared it too. Mrs. Gibbons's face twisted into a mask of sorrow and fury. I, the poor deluded soul, hired me to keep the dust at bay while he poked at forbidden's lore. He scoffed at the legends, said science would unravel him. But I warned him stay out of the blue room. He didn't listen. Slept there to test it. The screams, oh, miss, they curdled blood. Poison, they said. Bah! The bed poisoned his mind, fed him visions of his own dark deeds, experiments on animals, secrets buried in his journals, choked on his own terror, marks on his neck like fingers from beyond. Silence descended, heavy as a shroud. Miss Marple's mind raced, connecting dots like constellations of crime. The bed wasn't cursed by spirits, but perhaps rigged by human hands, hallucinogens, insulinins, mechanisms in the frame. And Mrs. Gibbons? Her tales too vivid, her presence too enduring. Was she guardian or architect of doom? Tell me, Mrs. Gibbons, Miss Marple said softly, her voice a velvet trap. You've served them all, yet served. Why? The housekeeper's eyes flickered with something full. Survived? I've danced with death, miss. But I know its steps avoid the bed, whisper prayers to the shadows. But the tempt fate by staying. As night deepened, the cottage creaked like a beast awakening. Miss Marple retired, but not to the bed. In the wee hours, stealthy footsteps padded outside her door. She feigned sleep, heart pounding like thunder in her chest. The knob turned slowly, a silhouette slipping in Mrs. Gibbons, vial in hand, eyes wild with desperation. "Ye know too much," the housekeeper hissed, advancing like a predator. "The bed's my shield stories to scare away claimants. The fortunes hidden beneath? Mine by right." Thornwood found the map. I silenced him with nightshade in his tea. "Now you." In a blur of motion, Miss Marple sprang up, her knitting needle jabbing like a stiletto. "Not so fast, Mrs. Gibbons Orshold, I say, descendant of Lady Evelyn's brother. Your tales betray you details only the killer would know." A struggle ensued. Furniture crashing like avalanches. Mrs. Gibbons lunged, vial shattering in acrid fumes, but Miss Marple dodged, alerting villagers with a pre-arranged signal flare from her window. Constables burst in, wrestling the snarling woman away. Dawn revealed the truth. The bed harbored no curse, only secret compartments with poisons and jewels. Mrs. Gibbons, last of a greedy line, had perpetuated the myth, murdering to claim the hoard. As Miss Marple departed Willowmere, the sun-banishing shadows, she mused on human frailty. Tragedies weren't woven by fate, but by avarice's cruel hand. In St. Mary Mead's peace she knitted on, ever ready for the next unraveling. In the flickering glow of a dying hearth, where embers crackled like brittle bones underfoot, Miss Jane Marple sat transfixed in Willowmere Cottage's dusty parlor. The air hung thick with the scent of lavender and lurking decay, a deceptive veil over the house's venomous secrets. Cobwebs draped from the ceiling like ghostly veils, and the walls seemed Tolian in, eager to overhear confessions. Before her hunched Mrs. Gibbons, the elderly housekeeper, a withered spectre of a woman. her face etched with ravenous self-worry, carved by decades of dread, her eyes gleaming like coals in a forgotten mine, burning with unsaid horrors. Hired by Professor Elias Thornwooden, his final frantic days, she had outlasted a parade of doomed owners like a grim reaper's faithful shadow, witnessing their descents into madness and oblivion. "You've come seeking truths, miss," she croaked, her voice a rusty hinge swinging open to a Pandora's box off nightmares. "But truths here bite like vipers in the grass, leaving the nymph that festers for lifetimes. Sit thee down by the fire, let its warmth chase the chill from your bones, and I'll spin the tales of the bed, the cursed cradle that devours dreams and spits out corpses." Broken and bloody, Miss Marple leaned forward in her armchair, its upholstery frayed like the edges of sanity, her knitting needles paused mid-stitch, sharp as an interrogator's probes piercing through veils of deception. "Pray, Mrs. Gibbons, enlighten me." The villagers whisper ostriches tied to that ornate monstrosity upstairs in the blue room, each owner felled by nightmares that claw at the soul or worse, deaths that defy explanation. Start from the beginning, if you will. Spare no detail. I find Thedival lurks in them. The housekeeper's gnarled hands, veined like lightning-scarred trees, clutched her apron like lifelines in a raging storm, her breath ragged as a storm-tossed sea crashing against jagged cliffs. Aye, from the beginning it is. Though it pains me to relive the shadows, Willowmere wasn't always a tomb of terrors, a house where echoes scream and silence suffocates. Built in 1789 by Lord Reginald Hawthorne, a man drunk on ambition and darker arts forbidden to mortal men. He was a collector of the macabre, holders of relics from cursed lands. The bed? He brought it from a raised abbey in the Scottish Highlands. Whispers say it was carved from ancient oak soaked in the blood of witches burned during the trials of 1692, their screams infused into the grain. Gargoyles leering from the four posts, with ice that follow the vines twisting like serpents in eternal agony. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial hiss, the fire casting demonic dances on her face. Lord Hawthorne, proud as Lucifer, slept in it once, and never woke Thesum. The first night he raved of visions that would curdle milk, his ancestors clawing up from muddy graves, their skeletal fingers accusing him of stolen fortunes and betrayed kin, rotten flesh hanging from bones, eyes glowing with vengeful fire. By morn he was a babbling fool, scratching at his throat as if invisible nooses tightened round his neck, choking the life from his arrogant soul. Doctors, those blind fools in white coats, called it apoplexy, a stroke of ill luck. But we servants knew the bed fed on his guilt, like apricot sucking marrow. He flung himself from the tower window 3 days later, body splattered on the cobblestones below like overripe fruit burst under boot. His blood stained the drive in crimson rivulets. Even torrential rains couldn't wash it away for weeks, as if the earth thirsted for more. Servants fooled in terror, swearing the bed pulsed with unholy life, its sheets whispering seductive invitations to doom, luring the next victim. Miss Marple's mind whirred like a clockwork enigma, piecing fleeting shadows into coherent shapes of suspicion. Fascinating. Guilt as the common thread, and the next unfortunate soul to inherit this venomous legacy. Mrs. Gibbons leaned in closer, her whisper slicing the air like a sharpened blade through silk. Lady Victoria Hawthorne, his widow a ravishing beauty with raven hair cascading like midnight waterfalls and a heart as black as pitch, poisoned by jealousy and secrets. Inherited Thelot, bed and all. In 1790, she mocked the tailies with laughter that echoed like shattering glass, called them peasant prattle, born of ignorance. To prove her mettle, she slept in it, defying the whispers. Oh, the screams that night! They yeechoed through the hollow like banshees birthing hellspawn, piercing eardrum sand, freezing blood and veins. We found her at dawn, eyes bulging like boiledigs about to burst, neck bruised purple, as if strangled by ghostly loversreisen from her past affairs. But no one was there save the bed, its canopiscing smugly like a satisfied predator. The autopsy, conducted by trembling hands, said heart failure from fright, but those finger marks told otherwise, imprinted like brands of judgment. Whispers grew rampant. The bed summoned spirits of the wronged, choking life from the wicked with icy grips that left no trace but death's cold kiss. A sudden gust rattled the windows like skeletal fingers tapping for entry, as if the cottage itself eavesdropped, hungry for more tailies to fuel its malevolence. Miss Marple nodded encouragingly, her blue eyes sharp as diamonds cutting through fog. "Continue, Mrs. Gibbons. These patterns intrigue me like threads in a tapestry of treachery, woven with human frailty and perhaps something more sinister." The housekeeper's laugh was a dry cackle, brittle as autumn leaves crunching underfoot in a graveyard. "Patterns? Aye, death's own intricate design, a web that ensnares the guilty." Next came Colonel Bertram Finch, a war-hardened brute, fresh from colonial slaughters in India, his hands stained with the blood of innocents. Bought Willowmere in 1852, seeking peace amid the Moor's misty embrace. Ha! The bed lured him like a siren's seductive song, permiserist but delivering damnation. First night he bolted upright, howling off battlefields, rising from the sheets ghosts of slain enemies, dragging him down to muddy graves, their bayonets glinting in moonlight, faces twisted in eternal rage. By week's end he was a trembling wreck, pistol in hand, shooting wildly at shadows that danced mockingly on the walls. One bullet found his temple in a thunderous crack. They called it suicide, a warrior's escape. But I saw thieved indentations in the mattress, like bodies had lain beside him. Cold spots lingering like accusing fingerprints. The air thick with the coppery stench often blood. Miss Marple paused her knitting, the threads off deduction weaving tighter in her mind like a spider's lethal silk. Guilt again? Each victim burdened by sins that the bed seems to amplify into fatalterments. Burdened, crushed under the weight of their own darkness. Mrs. Gibbons spat, her voice rising to a fevered pitch that echoed off the paneled walls. The bed don't just haunt its judges, ripping secrets from your soul and twisting 'em into nooses off nightmare. Take Miss Eliza Thornwood, the professor's great-aunt. In 1897, a spinster with a tongue sharp as thorns, hiding a bastard child given away in shame to avoid society's scorn. She claimed the cottage, defiant as a storm cloud, vowing to break the curse. Slept in the bed, only to dream of the babe-piercing cries echoing from the pillows, tiny hands reaching from the sheets to clutch her heart. Woke clawing at her ears, blood streaming down her cheeks like tears of crimson regret. Madness took her swift and merciless, shoe-entered into the moor's bog under moon's mocking gaze, drowning herself in its sucking embrace, body pulled down like quicksand's insatiable kiss. Villagers fished her out days later, face frozen in an eternal shriek, eyes wide with the horrors she couldn't escape. The fire popped suddenly, sparks flying like fleeing spirits scattering from judgment. Outside, winds moaned through the strangling ivy, mimicking the anguished cries of the damned souls trapped in memory. Miss Marple felt a chill slither down her spine, like icy fingers tracing fate's path, but her resolve hardened like forged steel in a blacksmith's fire. And more? The bed's appetite seems insatiable, feasting on one soul after another. Mrs. Gibbons's hands trembled violently, tea sloshing from her chipped cup like spilled blood on a battlefield. In 1923 came Reginald Blackwood, a charlatan medium peddling fraudulence and chesto, the gullible elite, conjuring false ghosts for gold. Thought he could Tamworth bed, commune with its spirits, and harness their power for profit. Foolhardy wretch! That fateful night, walls cracking and floors buckling, he emerged at dawn, his once dark hair turned white as fresh snow, babbling incoherently offerdals opening in the mattress demons with flame-whip tails, dragging him to fury pits where his victims' spirits awaited with sharpened pitchforks. Locked himself in the attic, barring the door against the invisible hordes, starving to death rather than face the bed's wrath again. His body withered to marrow bones wrapped in papery skin, eyes hollow as the abyss he glimpsed, staring into nothingness. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed to slits, suspicion coiling like smoke rising from the hearth. Each tale escalates, guilt manifesting as ghosts, driving to madness and self-destruction. Yet Professor Thornwood, a man of science, dared to challenge it too? Mrs. Gibbons's face twisted into a grotesque mask of sorrow and barely concealed fury, tears glinting like diamonds off despair. I, the poor deluded soul, blind to the shadows creeping closer, hired me to keep the dust at bay and the fires lit while he poked at forbidden lore in his alchemical den. He scoffed at the legends with the arrogant laugh of his, said science would unravel him like pulling threads from a frayed sweater. But I warned him, begged him on bended knee stay out of the blue room, away from that bed's grasp. He didn't listen, stubborn as a mule inward. Slept there to test its effects, note-padding hand. The screams that night dot. Oh, miss, they curdled blood in veins and raised hairs on arms. Piercing, guttural, like a man being torn asunder by wolves. Foam-flecking hislips, body rigid in death's embrace. Poison, the authorities muttered. Bah! They poisoned his mind, fed him visions of his own dark deeds, cruel experiments in helpless animals. Secrets buried deep in his journals of occult meddling, choked on his own terror. Those telltale marks on his neck, like fingers from beyond the veil squeezing tighter. A heavy silence descended upon the parlor, thick as a burial shroud, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock, each talk a heartbeat closer to revelation. Miss Marple's mind raced like a fox evading hounds, connecting scattered dots into constellations of crimean deceit. The bed wasn't cursed by ethereal spirits, but perhaps rigged by cunning human hands, hallucinogenic powders dusted on the linens, mechanical contraps hidden in the frame to simulate chills and sounds. And Mrs. Gibbons? Her tales too vivid, too intimate, her presence too enduring through decades of death. Was she a mere guardian of the house, or the architect of Fit's deadly symphony? Tell me, Mrs. Gibbons, Miss Marple said softly, her voice a velvet trap baited with honeyed words. "You've served them all, witnessed their final agonies, yet survived unscathed. How have you evaded the bed's clutches? What secret armor do you wear against its terrors?" The housekeeper's eyes flickered with something feral and unguarded, a wild animal cornered in its den. "Survived? I've danced on the edge of death's precipice, miss, peering into its yawning void, but I know its steps. Its rhythm avoid the bed at all costs, whisper prayers to shadows that lurk, and keep me head down like a mouse in a cat's domain. But the tempt fate by staying, poking at wounds that bleed afresh. Lavino before the bed claims you too." As the night deepened into an inky abyss, the cottage creaked and groaned like a colossal beast awakening from slumber, its bones shifting with malice. Miss Marple retired to her guest room, but sleep was a distant stranger. Instead she lay in wait, senses honed like aperdators. In the wee hours, when the world hovered between dreams and dawn, stealthy footsteps padded outside her door, soft, deliberate, like a thief in the night. She feigned deep slumber, her breathing even, heart pounding like thunder rolling across stormy skies. The knob turned slowly with a click that echoed like a gunshot in the silence, and a silhouette slipped in Mrs. Gibbons, her face a mask of desperate madness, a glinting vial clutched in her trembling fist. "Ye know too much, the nosy crone," the housekeeper hissed, her voice a venomous snake striking from hiding. "The bed's my shield, my weapon stories spun to scare away claimants, keeping the fortunes hidden beneath its frame for me alone. Thornwood uneartheth ancient map to the jewels." I silenced him with nightshade slipped in hyphening tea, watching him writhe. The others? Poisoned dreams, staged hauntings, my handiwork to claim what's mine by blood, right. Now you join Amin's dirt. In a blur of motion that belied her age, Miss Marple sprang up from the bed like a coiled spring releasing, her knitting needle jabbing forward like a stiletto aimed true. "Not so fast, Mrs. Gibbons, or should I say, the last descendant of Lady Evelyn's treacherous brother. Your tales betray you utterly details only the killer could recount, laced with glee disguised as grief. A ferocious struggle ensued, furniture crashing like avalanches in the confined space, lamps toppling and shattering cascades off glass. Mrs. Gibbons lunged with animalistic fury, the vial arcing through Thea, but Miss Marple dodged with surprising agility honed from years of quiet observation, the container shattering on the floor in a hiss of acrid fumes that burned the nostrils. The housekeeper choked on the vapors, clutching her throat in ironic mimicry of her victim's fates, eyes bulging in panic. Seizing the moment, Miss Marple yanked a arranged cord hidden by her bedside, a signal bell wired to the village constable's post, installed earlier with foresight that now proved life-saving. Doors burst open downstairs in a cacophony of boots and shouts, authorities storming the room like avenging angels, wrestling the snarling, spitting woman to the ground. Irons clanged shut around her wrists, her roars of defeat echoing through the hollow like the final gasp of a dying beast. As dawn's golden fingers pierced the curtains, bathing Willowmere in a light of redemption and revelation, Miss Marple stood amid the chaos, composed as ever in her tweed skirt and sensible shoes. The bed, stripped of its mystique under scrutinizing eyes, revealed no supernatural curse-only secret compartments brimming with vials of hallucinogens, mechanical bellows for chills and moans, and a cache of glittering jewels worth a king's ransom. Mrs. Gibbons, unmasked as the last of a gritty bloodline, had perpetuated the myth for generations, murdering with poison and deception to seize the hidden hoard. Word spread through Eldridge Hollow like wildfire, villagers gathering in awe and gratitude for the unassuming sleuth shattered the chains of fear. The jewels were distributed reparations for past wrongs, funding schools and homes, turning curse into communal blessing. As Miss Marple departed Willowmere on thirtling train, the sun rising triumphant over the moors, she mused quietly on the fragility of superstition and the depths of human avarice. Tragedies weren't woven by ethereal fates or cursed relics, but by the cruel hands of greed and guile. Back in the tranquil embrace of St. Mary Mead, amid blooming roses and endless afternoons of tea, she resumed her knitting, each stitch a reminder that mysteries lurked everywhere like shadows waiting to be chased by light, ever drawing her onward into the unknown. Chapter 5. Whispers After Midnight. In the witching hour, when Willowmere Cottage crouched under a moonless sky, Miss Jane Marple lay awake, her senses sharp as a blade honed on suspicion. The air pulsed with menace, thick with the cloying scent of lavender that slithered through the halls like a ghostly intruder. Inherited from thelate Professor Thornwood, whose death reeked of treachery, this crumbling relic of stone and secrets whispered its own dark lullaby. Tonight the cottage wayslive, its pulse a cacophony of dread that clawed at the edges of sanity. Footsteps soft, deliberate, like a predator stalking prey echoed from the corridor beyond her bolted door. Not the creak of settling wood, but a measured tread that paused, as if listening. Then came the voices, low, guttural murmurs weaving through the walls, words indistinct yet dripping with malice. Miss Marple's heart thudded, but her mind was a steel trap, snapping shut on fear. She rose, clutching her knitting needles like daggers, and pressed her ear to the icy door. The lavender scent intensified, sweet as betrayal, curling into her nostrils like a siren's lure. "Show yourselves," she whispered, her voice a defiant spark in the dark. The murmurs ceased abruptly, replaced by a chilling giggle that skittered down her spine. The footsteps resumed, circling closer, then fading toward the blue room, the cursed heart of Willowmere, home to that nightmare-forged bed. Villagers had warned her. After midnight the dead walk, their whispers weaving doom. But Miss Marple scoffed at ghosts. She hunted human monsters, slipping into the hall. Her lantern cast trembling shadows that danced like specters on the peeling wallpaper. The lavender trail led her to the blue room's door, ajar despite her earlier lock. Inside, the air was a frozen blade, slicing through her shawl. The bed loomed, its gargoyle-carved posts leering under flickering light, sheets rumpled as if freshly abandoned. A faint hum vibrated from the frame, unnatural, alive. Then a clatter from below, sharp as a guillotine's fall. Descending the creaking stairs, she followed the scent to the cellar door, its rusted hinges gaping open like a screaming mouth. The murmurs returned, now clear. "Hide it." "Before she finds?" A man's voice, rough as gravel, laced with panic. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. Thornwood's journals mentioned a hidden fortune, jewels buried beneath the cottage. Was this the motive cloaked in ghostly guise? In the cellar, dank and shadowed, she found crates stacked like tombstones. Behind one, a trapdoor yawned, exhaling lavender and secrets. Footsteps scuffled below human, not spectral. She crept down, lantern low, and spotted Hargrove, the village innkeeper, his scarred face twisted in greed's fever. He clutched a velvet pouch, gems glinting like demon eyes. "You," he snarled, spotting her. "Meddling old hag. These jewels are mine. Thornwood died for M." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, piecing the puzzle's jagged edges. "No ghosts, then," she said coolly. "Just you staging whispers and scents to scare away claimants. Nightshade and Thornwood's tea, wasn't it? Masked as a curse's chokehold." Hargrove lunged, a dagger flashing, but she sidestepped, tripping him with her umbrella's hooked handle. He crashed into crates, gems scattering like cursed stars. The murmurs were his accomplices, villagers bribed to haunt the halls, their lavender-soaked rags creating the spectral set. Miss Marple had wired a signal bell earlier, anticipating treachery. Its clang summoned constables, who stormed in, irons clanking, as Hargrove's curses echoed defeat. The jewels unearthed would rebuild the village, not line a killer's pockets dot as dawn bled gold over Eldridge Hollow. Willowmere stood silent, its whispers stilled. Miss Marple returned to St. Mary Mead, knitting by her fire, musing on shadows born of greed. Mysteries were her crucible, forging truth from terror's forge, and she was ever ready for the next Chapter 6. The Stranger at Churchyard. As dusk bled crimson across the Eldridge Hollow churchyard, where crooked tombstones leaned like drunken sentinels, Miss Jane Marple's sharp gaze snagged on a chilling tableau. A tall stranger, cloaked in black like a spectre summoned from nightmare, knelt before an unmarked grave, placing blood-red roses with reverence that reeked of secrets. Willowmere Cottage, her cursed inheritance from the murdered Professor Thornwood, loomed nearby, its ivy-clad walls whispering treachery. The stranger's presence was no coincidence. It was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and Miss Marple's instincts thrummed like a tightened bowstring. She lingered behind a yew tree, its gnarled branches clawing the twilight, her heart pounding with the thrill of unraveling malice. The man's face was obscured, but his movements deliberate, haunted, betrayed a soul tethered to guilt. His gloved hand brushed the grave's bare earth, as if caressing a wound only he understood. Miss Marple's mind raced. Thornwood's death ruled poison, bore strangulation, marks human, not spectral. Was this stranger a mourner or the architect of doom? The churchyard exhaled a chill, mist coiling like serpents around her ankles. She stepped forward, her sensible shoes crunching gravel, shattering the silence like a gunshot. "Good evening, sir," she called, her voice a velvet blade slicing through the gloom. "A curious choice, an unmarked grave. Might I know whose memory you honor?" The stranger stiffened, his head snapping up, eyes glinting like daggers under his hat's brim. "None of your concern, old woman," he growled, voice low as a grave's echo. He rose, towering like a storm cloud, and strode toward the village, his coat flapping like raven wings. But Miss Marple noted his boots caked with mud from Willowmere's cellar, where she'd found traces of Nightshade. Back at the cottage, where shadows danced with malevolent glee, she pieced together fragments of dread. Thornwood's journals, hidden in the blue room, hinted at a partner, a man betrayed, seeking vengeance. The grave, she recalled, was near Lady Evelyn's, whose murder birthed Willowmere's curse. Was the stranger tied to her bloodline, or Thornwood's killer masking guilt with flowers? Night fell like a guillotine, and the cottage groaned under unseen weight. Footsteps echoed in the hall's his. She was certain, stalking her like a wolf circling prey. Lavender's cloying scent drifted, a hallmark of the staged hauntings she'd unraveled. Armed with her knitting needles and a constable's whistle, Miss Marple set a trap, leaving the cellar door ajar, a lantern flickering to lure the predator. He came at midnight, a silhouette of menace, clutching a vial that gleamed with poison's promise. "You meddle too much," he snarled, revealed as Gideon Blackthorn, the innkeeper's cousin, his face twisted with greed's fever. "Thornwood stole my share of the jewels hidden here. You'll not take them." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed like polished steel. "The grave your sisters, poisoned by your hand to silence her claims. You killed Thornwood too, didn't you?" Nightshade, disguised as the bed's curse. She blew the whistle, its shrill cry piercing the night. Blackthorn lunged, but she sidestepped, tripping him with her umbrella. He crashed, vials shattering in acrid fumes. As constables stormed in, irons clanking like justice's hammer. Dawn bathed the churchyard in gold, revealing the grave's truth. Blackthorn's sister, erased to protect his theft. The jewels, unearthed from Willowmere's foundations, would heal the village's wounds. Miss Marple departed, her mind already weaving new mysteries. In St. Mary Mead's quiet, she knitted by firelight, knowing evil wore human masks, not ghostly veils, and her needles were ever ready to unravel them. Chapter 7. A Missing Will. In the oppressive gloom of Willowmere Cottage, where shadows slithered like vipers in wait, Miss Jane Marple clutched a yellowed letter that scorched her fingers with intrigue. The document, penned by the late Professor Elias Thornwood, declared her heir to this cursed pile of stone and secrets, but whispers from Eldridge, Hollow's gossip mill, hinted at a darker truth. An earlier will vanished like a ghost at dawn, under circumstances reeking of treachery. As dusk bled crimson through cracked windows, Miss Marple's keen eyes glittered, her mind a crucible forging clarity from deception's fog. The cottage, inherited after Thornwood's poisoning disguised, as the blue room bed's curse creaked with malice, its walls exhaling a cloying lavender scent. She rummaged through the professor's study, a chaos of occult tomes and alchemical vials, unearthing a locked box beneath a floorboard. Its contents, a torn scrap of parchment, marked with Thornwood's spidery script, hinting at a prior will naming a different heir, a niece, Clara, long vanished. The discovery ignited suspicion like wildfire. Someone had buried this document to claim Willowmere's hidden jewels. Night descended like a guillotine's blade, and the cottage awoke with sinister life. Footsteps thudded in the attic, deliberate as a heartbeat, followed by guttural murmurs weaving through the air like spells. Miss Marple, knitting needles poised like daggers, crept upstairs, her lantern casting shadows that danced like demons. The attic door hung ajar, revealing a figure rifling through crates. Mrs. Hargrove, the innkeeper's wife, her face a mask of greed twisted by panic. "You," she hissed, eyes wild as a cornered beast's. "The will was mine to destroy. Clara's dead, and those jewels are my birthright." A knife gleamed in her hand, its edge promising death. Miss Marple's pulse raced, but her voice was ice. You poisoned Thornwood, didn't you? Staged the curse to mask murder, burned the true will to steal Clara's claim. Mrs. Hargrove lunged, blade slashing the air, but Miss Marple sidestepped, her umbrella hooking the woman's ankle. She crashed, knife skittering into shadows, as a hidden panel in the attic floor popped open, spilling papers. Among them, the missing will intact, naming Clara as heir to Willowmere and its buried fortune. The lavender scent, Miss Marple realized, was Hargrove's trick-laced rags to mimic hauntings covering her theft. You burned a decoy, Miss Marple said, piecing the puzzle's jagged edges. Clara's alive, hidden in fear of your blade. You killed Thornwood when he suspected, using nightshade to mimic the bed's fabled chokehold. Hargrove's snarl confirmed it. Her confession spilling like venom. She tracked Clara, forged the new will, and murdered to secure the jewels Miss Marple had prepared, wiring a signal bell to the village constable. Its clang pierced the night, summoning officers who stormed the attic, irons clanking as Hargrove's curses echoed defeat. Clara, found hiding in a nearby convent, wept as the true will restored her legacy. The jewels, unearthed from beneath the blue room, would fund the village's revival, not a killer's greed. As dawn painted Eldridge hollow gold, Willowmere stood silent, its secrets exorcised. Miss Marple departed, her knitting bag slung over her shoulder, musing on greed's cruel artistry. In St. Mary Mead's tranquil embrace, she resumed her stitching, each knot a testament to her unraveling of human malice. Mysteries like shadows waited, always luring her to pierce their darkness with truth's unrelenting light. Chapter 8. Secrets in the Linen Chest. In the suffocating gloom of Willowmere Cottage's blue room, where moonlight bled through cracked panes like spectral tears, Miss Jane Marple's deft fingers probed a linen chest, its wood warped as if twisted by dread. The room, heart of the cottage's curse, pulsed with menace, its gargoyle-carved bed leering like a beast ready to devour. Inherited from the poisoned Professor Thornwood, Willowmere was a labyrinth of lies, and Miss Marple's sharp eyes hunted truth amid shadows. Beneath moth-eaten sheets, reeking of lavender and decay, she unearthed a leather-bound diary, its pages crackling with cryptic warnings that ignited her pulse like wildfire. The diary, penned in Thornwood's frantic scrawl, was a Pandora's box of terror. "Beware the bed's embrace," one entry hissed. "It whispers secrets, poisons dreams. The chest hides my shame, betrayal festers below." Another, "The village conspires. Lavender masks their venom." Her heart thundered as she read, each word a dagger slicing through the cottage's ghostly facade. Thornwood hadn't died by supernatural curse, but by human treachery. His strangulation marks a staged deceit. As midnight's claw gripped Willowmere, the air grew thick, the lavender scent coiling like a noose. Footsteps stealthy, predatory, stalked the hall, paired with hissed murmurs. "She's found it. Bury her with him." Miss Marple, clutching her knitting needles like stilettos, slipped behind the bed's canopy, her breath shallow. The door creaked open, revealing Silas Grimshaw, the village sexton, his gaunt face twisted with greed's fever, a vial of shimmering liquid glinting in his fist. "You meddling hag," he snarled, eyes blazing like hellfire. "Thornwood's diary exposes my theft jewels hidden beneath this cursed room. He died for snooping. You'll follow." Miss Marple's mind raced, weaving threads of deduction. Grimshaw, a descendant of Lady Evelyn's killer, had laced the bed's linens with hallucinogens, mimicking the curse. The lavender? A ploy to mask nightshade's bitter tang, used to silence Thornwood. She stepped into the moonlight, voice calm as steel. You staged the hauntings, didn't you? Vials in the chest, pipes for ghostly moans, all to guard your stolen hoard. Grimshaw lunged, vial raised, but Miss Marple dodged, her umbrella toppling a candelabra. It crashed, flames licking the floor, catching his sleeve. He howled, dropping the poison, which hissed into acrid fumes as she blew her hidden whistle, a signal wired to the constable's post. Footsteps thundered below. Constables stormed in, irons clanking as Grimshaw's curses echoed like a beast's death throes. The diary's final page revealed the jewel's location, beneath the chest, a trapdoor hiding a glittering cache. Miss Marple exposed the truth. Grimshaw's ancestors had murdered for the fortune, and he perpetuated the bed's myth, poisoning heirs to keep it. The lavender was his signature, a scented shroud for murder. Dawn's golden fingers caressed Eldridge Hollow, banishing Willowmere's shadows. The jewels reclaimed would mend the village's scars, not fuel a killer's greed. As Miss Marple boarded the train, her knitting bag slung over her shoulder, she reflected on deception's artistry. In St. Mary Mead's serene embrace, her needles clicked, weaving order from chaos. Mysteries were her crucible, their secrets kindling for truth's relentless flame, ever luring her to unravel the next dark thread. Chapter 9. The Man from London. In the cloying grip of twilight, where Willowmere Cottage squatted like a brooding beast amid Eldridge Hollow's mist-shrouded moors, Miss Jane Marple felt the first icy tendrils of true peril snake through her veins. The air hung heavy with lavender's deceptive perfume, masking deeper rot, as a sharp rap echoed from the door like a judge's gavel sealing fate. She opened it to reveal a towering figure, Inspector Crayford from London, his trench coat dripping fog like blood from a wound, his eyes piercing as daggers forged in Scotland Yard's unyielding fires. "Miss Marple," he intoned, voice gravelly as a grave digger's shovel, "I'm Inspector Elias Crayford. We've crossed paths before in that St. Mary Mead affair. But this is no quaint village puzzle. Willowmere is a viper's nest, tied to a disappearance that haunts my career. And you, madam, are perched on its fangs." Miss Marple's blue eyes sharpened, her knitting bag slung like a shield. "Do come in, Inspector. Tea? Or perhaps something stronger to chase the chill." She ushered him into the parlor, where the fire crackled defiantly against encroaching shadows. The blue room upstairs loomed in her mind, the cursed bed, the hidden diary, the unearthed jewels, all threads in a tapestry of murder she'd begun unraveling since inheriting this forsaken pile from the poisoned Professor Thornwood. Crayford paced, his boots thudding like impending doom. No time for pleasantries. 15 years ago, a man vanished here, Sir Reginald Voss, a London financier with ties to occult societies. Last seen entering Willowmere, then poof gone, like smoke in a gale. No body, no clues, just whispers of a curse swallowing him whole. But I smell foul play, and your arrival stirs the pot. Someone's watching, Miss Marple. Danger lurks. Her heart quickened, but her voice remained steady as a surgeon's scalpel. The bed's curse? Or human greed? I've uncovered poisons, staged hauntings, a missing will, Voss... His name echoes in Thornwood's diary. Voss knows the secret vein. Perhaps the jewels? Crayford's brow furrowed like storm clouds gathering. Jewels? Voss dealt in black market artifacts, rumored to have hidden a fortune in these walls. If Thornwood found it, but the disappearance predates him. Locals say Voss argued with the then owner, a reclusive widow. She died soon after, raving of ghosts. Now you inherit, and shadows stir. Footsteps at night? Lavender scents? Murmurs? Miss Marple nodded, her mind whirring like a clockwork enigma. Precisely. And a stranger in the churchyard, laying roses on an unmarked grave. But danger? From whom? From the past's vengeful grasp, Crayford growled. Voss had enemies, rival collectors, betrayed partners. One might still prowl, fearing exposure. Stay vigilant. I'll dig deeper in the village. As Crayford departed into the fog, Willowmere seemed to exhale malice, its ivy tendrils writhing like awakened serpents. Miss Marple barred the door, her knitting needles clicking a rhythmic ward against fear. But sleep evaded her, replaced by the diary's cryptic scrawls. Voss vanished in the cellar portal to perdition. The cellar, where she'd found traces of nightshade and jewel crumbs. Midnight struck like a thunderclap, and the cottage erupted in chaos. Footsteps thundered overhead, heavy as judgment's hammer. Whispers slithered through vents. The meddler knows. Bury her with Voss. Lavender choked the air, thick as poison gas. Miss Marple seized her lantern, its flame guttering like a soul in torment, and descended to the cellar, a dank abyss reeking of earth and secrets. There, amid crates like sarcophagi, a trapdoor yawned, exhaling chill draughts. She pried it open, revealing stairs plunging into blackness. Heart pounding like war drums, she descended, the lantern casting grotesque shadows that capered mockingly. At the bottom, a hidden chamber, walls etched with arcane symbols. A makeshift altar strewn with faded photographs, Voss, Thornwood, and others. Linked in a web of occult greed. A rustle, then a figure lunged from the gloom. Tall and cloaked, a gloved hand brandishing a syringe glinting with lethal promise. You should have heeded the inspector, old crone. Snarled a voice muffled by a mask. Voss discovered the jewel's curse ancient blood debt. I silenced him, walled him up. Thornwood, too, when he unearthed the truth. Now you. Miss Marple dodged, her umbrella parrying the thrust, the syringe clattering into shadows. Unmask yourself, she demanded, voice cutting like steel. The assailant ripped off the disguise, revealing Dr. Elias Hawthorne, the village physician, his face contorted in madness's grip. Hawthorne? Descendant of the original builder? Aye. He roared, eyes blazing like infernos. Voss was my partner. We hid the jewels here, stolen from Egyptian tombs, cursed relics that drive men mad. He betrayed me, tried to claim them alone. I bricked him in alive, his screams music to my ears. The widow saw too much poisoned her. Thornwood dug too deep nightshade in his tea. The hauntings? My tricks to guard the hoard. Crayford's close. You'll be the final loose end. He charged like a bull, but Miss Marple, agile as a fox, tripped him with her knitting bag. He sprawled, head cracking against stone, dazed. She seized a loose brick, revealing a niche Voss's skeletal remains, clutching a gem-encrusted scarab that pulsed with unholy light. The curse ... real? She gasped. Hawthorne laughed maniacally, blood trickling from his temple. Not supernatural hallucinogens in the gem's coating, ancient poison, drives victims to self-destruction, but profitable sold pieces on the black market. You inherit, you die. Upstairs, doors crashed. Inspector Crayford burst in, pistol drawn, flanked by constables. Miss Marple. I suspected Hawthorne. His alibis crumbled. Traced Voss's last telegram to him. Hawthorne lunged for the scarab, but Crayford's shot rang out, shattering the artifact in a burst of iridescent dust. The doctor howled, convulsing as the poison fumes claimed him, his body twisting in agony's final dance. Dawn broke over Willowmere, its golden rays exorcising the night's terrors. The jewel's cursed relics were confiscated, destined for museums under lock and key. Voss's remains laid to rest, the unmarked grave now named. Inspector Crayford tipped his hat. You've a knack for danger, Miss Marple. Solved what plagued me for years. She smiled faintly, packing her bag. Human greed, Inspector, not curses. Though sometimes they blur. As the train rattled from Eldridge Hollow, Willowmere faded into mist, its secrets buried. In St. Mary Mead's peaceful haven, Miss Marple resumed knitting, each stitch weaving calm from chaos. Yet her eyes gleamed mysteries called, ever hungry for her unyielding light. Chapter 10. A Night of Terror. In the suffocating blackness of midnight, where Willowmere Cottage groaned under the assault of a raging storm, Miss Jane Marple bolted awake, her heart slamming like a battering ram against her ribs. Thunder roared like a vengeful god, lightning slashing the sky in jagged fury, illuminating the room in ghastly flashes. The air reeked of ozone and lavender, that insidious scent that had haunted her since inheriting this accursed den from the murdered Professor Thornwood. But tonight something sinister shattered the fragile veil of peace, a crash downstairs, explosive as a cannon's blast, followed by the unmistakable thud of intruder footsteps stomping through the halls. Miss Marple's fingers gripped her knitting needles like lethal spikes, her mind racing through the maze of mysteries she'd unraveled. The cursed bed in the blue room, the hidden diary's cryptic warnings, the unearthed jewels pulsing with ancient malice, and Inspector Crayford's dire revelations about the vanished Sir Reginald Voss. Intruders, she whispered, her voice a steel thread cutting through fear. Slipping from bed, she donned her robe, lantern in hand, its flame flickering like a trapped soul. The storm howled outside, rain lashing windows like merciless whips, but inside the real tempest brewed, creeping down the creaking stairs, each step a potential betrayal. She followed the trail of chaos. The front door hung ajar, splintered wood testifying to brutal force. Muddy footprints, large, boot-shaped, caked with more, sludge snaked across the foyer, leaving a filthy path of accusation straight toward the blue room. Her pulse thundered. The prints gleamed weightily in the lantern light, leading like breadcrumbs to doom. "Who dares?" she murmured, advancing with the stealth of a shadow. The blue room door loomed, its brass knob glinting mockingly. She turned it locked from the inside, the key still in place on her side. Impossible. Yet the footprints halted there, as if the intruder had vaporized through solid oak. A chill slithered down her spine, colder than the storm's breath. Was this the curse manifesting? Or human cunning, more deadly than any ghost? Lightning cracked, illuminating the hall in stark white horror. Miss Marple knelt, examining the prints. Fresh, with distinct treads matching those she'd seen on the churchyard stranger Gideon Blackthorne. Unmasked, but escaped in prior turmoil? No, he'd been arrested. Or had he? Crayford's words echoed. Enemies prowl. She rose, determination forging her frail frame into iron. I shan't be cowed, she declared, fetching a hairpin to pick the lock, a skill gleaned from village, gossip and keen observation. The tumblers clicked like fate's reluctant surrender. The door swung inward on hinges screaming protest. Inside, the blue room was a vortex of nightmare. The four-poster bed dominated, its gargoyles leering with demonic glee, canopy sagging like a predator's maw. Muddy smears marred the floorboards, circling the bed like ritual markings. But the room was empty, no intruder, no escape. Windows barred, chimney too narrow. A locked room enigma, wrapped in terror's shroud. Then a low growl emanated from beneath the bed, guttural as a beast from hell. Miss Marple's lantern trembled, casting wild shadows. "Show yourself," she commanded, voice slicing the air. From the darkness slithered a figure tall, cloaked, face obscured by a hood dripping rainwater. He rose like a phoenix from ashes, muddy boots confirming the trail. "You," she gasped. The intruder ripped off his hood, revealing a scarred visage. Dr. Hawthorne's accomplice? No, Inspector Crayford himself, eyes wild with desperation's fire. Crayford? Betrayal. He lunged, hands outstretched like claws, but Miss Marple sidestepped, her umbrella, ever her faithful weapon, cracking against his knee. He crumpled, groaning. Why? She demanded, needles poised. Crayford's laugh was a broken rasp. "The jewels, Miss Marple. Voss's hoard cursed, yes, but worth fortunes. I silenced him years ago, partnered with Hawthorne. Your meddling exposed us. Tonight I end it, stage your death as the curse's final victim." Miss Marple's mind flashed, the footprints leading to a locked door, a secret passage. She'd glimpsed hints in the diary. The bed hides it, she realized. Crayford had entered via a concealed tunnel from the moors, locking the door behind to baffle pursuers. Thunder boomed as he rose, syringe glinting nightshade, the curse's venom. "Die quietly," he snarled. The storm raged, rain pounding like accusatory fists. Miss Marple dodged his thrust, the needle embedding in the bedpost. She yanked a cord, her pre-rigged alarm, wired to the village bell tower, a precaution after Hawthorne's attack. The bell tolled, deep and ominous, cutting through the gale. Crayford froze, panic etching his features. "You cunning witch!" He charged again, but footsteps thundered from below villagers. Roused by the signal, bursting through the shattered door, Dot, led by the innkeeper Hargrove. Now redeemed, they subdued Crayford, irons clanking like justice's chains. He was the mastermind, Miss Marple explained, breath ragged. Voss's killer, Thornwood's poisoner. The break-in? A ruse to access the final jewel cache beneath the bed. As constables hauled Crayford away, his curses swallowed by the storm, Miss Marple uncovered the passage, a dank tunnel burrowing to the moors, muddy from rain. At its end, the last relics, scarabs glowing with toxic allure. Dawn pierced the clouds, banishing the night's terror. Willowmere stood purged, its secrets laid bare. Miss Marple, victorious yet weary, departed Eldridge Hollow, the cottage bequeathed to Clara, the rightful heir. In St. Mary Mead's serenity she knitted by firelight, reflecting on night's grip. Terror wasn't in curses, but in hearts blackened by greed. Mysteries beckoned, her needles ready to pierce the veil once more. In the suffocating blackness of midnight, where Willowmere Cottage groaned under the assault of a raging storm that howled like a legion of damned souls, Miss Jane Marple bolted awake, her heart slamming like a battering ram against her fragile ribs. Thunder roared like a vengeful god unleashing wrath upon the earth, lightning slashing the sky in jagged fury that illuminated the room in ghastly, fleeting flashes of electric blue. The air reeked of ozone mingled with that insidious, cloying lavender scent that had haunted her every waking moment since inheriting this accursed den from the murdered Professor Elias Thornwood. But tonight, something far more sinister shattered the fragile veil of uneasy peace. A crash downstairs, explosive as a cannon's blast echoing through the hollow, followed by the unmistakable thud of intruder footsteps, stomping through the halls with deliberate menace. Miss Marple's gnarled fingers gripped her knitting needles like lethal spikes forged. In the fires of determination, her mind racing through the labyrinthine maze of mysteries she'd painstakingly unraveled during her stay, the cursed bed in the blue room with its gargoyle carvings that seemed to watch with malevolent eyes, the hidden diary's cryptic warnings scrawled in frantic ink, the unearthed jewels pulsing with an ancient, forbidden malice, and Inspector Crayford's dire revelations about the vanished Sir Reginald Voss and the web of occult greed that entangled them all. "Intruders in the night," she whispered to the darkness, her voice a thin thread of steel cutting through the grip of fear. Slipping from her bed with the grace of a shadow, she donned her woolen robe, its fabric a meager armor against the chill, and seized her lantern, its flame flickering like a trapped soul desperate for escape. Creeping down the creaking stairs, each step a potential betrayal that could announce her presence to the lurking evil, she followed the trail of chaos with bated breath. The front door hung ajar on splintered hinges, wood fragments scattered like the remnants of a shattered life, testifying to the brutal force of entry. Muddy footprints, large, boot-shaped, caked with the thick sludge of the storm-drenched moors, snaked across the foyer floor, leaving a filthy path of accusation that pointed straight toward the blue room upstairs. Her pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out the rain's relentless drumbeat. The prints gleamed weightly in the lantern's hesitant light, leading like sinister breadcrumbs to a destination steeped in doom. "Who dares invade this house of horrors?" she murmured, her eyes narrowing as she advanced with the stealth of a predator in unfamiliar territory. The blue room door loomed at the end of the hall, its brass knob glinting mockingly under the sporadic lightning flashes. Miss Marple reached out, her hand steady despite the storm raging within her chest, and turned it locked, bolted from the inside, the key still firmly in place on her side of the threshold. Impossible. Yet the footprints halted abruptly there, as if the intruder had vaporized through solid oak or been swallowed by the very walls. A chill slithered down her spine, colder than the storm's biting breath seeping through cracks. Was this the manifestation of Willowmere's legendary curse, the bed's vengeful spirit claiming another victim? Or was it human cunning, more deadly and devious than any ethereal ghost? Lightning cracked again, illuminating the hall in stark white horror that cast long, distorted shadows like grasping fingers. Miss Marple knelt on the cold floorboards, her lantern close, examining the prints with the precision of a surgeon dissecting a corpse. Fresh mud, with distinct treads that matched those she'd noted on the churchyard stranger, Gideon Blackthorne, the man unmasked in earlier confrontations, but who had slipped custody in the chaos. No, he'd been arrested by Crayford. Or had he? The inspector's warning words echoed in her mind like a dire prophecy. Enemies prowl these moors, Miss Marple. Voss's disappearance was just the beginning. She rose, determination forging her frail, elderly frame into unyielding iron. I shan't be cowed by shadows or storms, she declared to the empty hall, fetching a hairpin from her pocket, a makeshift tool gleaned from years of village gossip and keen, unobserved practice. The tumblers clicked open with a sound like fate's reluctant surrender, the door swinging inward on hinges that screamed in protest against the intrusion. Inside, the blue room was a vortex of nightmare made manifest. The four-poster bed dominated the space, its mahogany frame twisted into grotesque carvings of gargoyles with leering eyes that seemed to follow her every move, the canopy sagging like a predator's gaping maw ready to snap shut. Muddy smears marred the polished floorboards, circling the bed like ancient ritual markings etched in filth. But the room was eerily empty, no intruder lurking in corners, no sign of escape. The windows were barred shut against the gale, the chimney flue too narrow for even a child to navigate. A locked room enigma, wrapped tightly in terror's suffocating shroud, defying logic and inviting madness. Then, from the inky blackness beneath the bed, a low growl emanated, guttural and primal as a beast risen from hell's deepest pits. Miss Marple's lantern trembled in her grasp, casting wild, dancing shadows that capered mockingly across the walls. "Show yourself, you coward," she commanded, her voice slicing through the air like a whip's crack. From the darkness slithered a figure tall, cloaked in sodden fabric, face obscured by a hood dripping rainwater like tears from a weeping phantom. He rose like a phoenix emerging from ashes of deceit, his muddy boots confirming the treacherous trail that had led her here. "You!" she gasped, recognition dawning like a thunderbolt. The intruder ripped off his hood with dramatic flair, revealing a scarred visage twisted by years of hidden sins. Not Blackthorne, but Inspector Crayford himself, his eyes wild with the desperate fire of a man cornered by his own web of lies. Crayford? The betrayer in our midst. He lunged forward, hands outstretched like talons eager to rend flesh. But Miss Marple sidestepped with surprising agility, her umbrella ever her faithful, unassuming weapon cracking against his knee with a sickening thud. He crumpled to the floor, groaning in agony, as lightning illuminated his contorted features. "Why, Inspector? Why this treachery?" she demanded, her knitting needles poised like stilettos ready to strike. Crayford's laugh was a broken, rasping cackle that echoed off the walls like the mockery of the damned. "The jewels, you meddlesome old bat. Voss's hoard cursed artifacts from forgotten tombs worth empires in the black market. I silenced him 15 years ago, my partner in crime with Hawthorne. We hid them here, but Voss tried to double-cross me. Bricked him alive in the tunnels. My career, a facade to cover the trail. Thornwood dug too deep, so Nightshade claimed him. Your arrival stirred the pot. Tonight I end the line stage your death as the curse is final. Tragic victim, footprints leading to a locked room, mystery no one solves. Miss Marple's mind flashed with crystalline clarity, piecing together the puzzle's jagged shards, the footprints leading to a locked door, a clever ruse concealing a secret passage. She'd glimpsed vague hints in Thornwood's diary, scribbled warnings of hidden veins beneath the bed. Crayford had entered via a concealed tunnel, burrowing from the storm-lashed moors, locking the door from inside to baffle any pursuers and perpetuate the myth of supernatural terror. Thunder boomed overhead as Crayford rose unsteadily, a syringe glinting in his fist filled with nightshade. The curse's insidious venom that mimicked ghostly strangulation. Die quietly and join the legends, he snarled, his face a mask of feral rage. The storm raged outside, rain pounding the roof like accusatory fists demanding justice. Miss Marple dodged his frantic thrust, the needle embedding harmlessly in the bedpost with a splintering crack. In that pulse-pounding moment, she yanked a hidden cord, her pre-rigged alarm system, cleverly wired to the distant village bell tower, a precaution installed after Hawthorne's savage attack. The bell tolled through the night, deep and ominous, its peals cutting through the gale like a clarion call for retribution. Crayford froze, panic etching deep furrows across his brow. "You cunning witch! How?" He charged again in blind fury, but footsteps thundered from below the villagers, roused from slumber by the urgent signal, bursting through the shattered front door with lanterns blazing and pitchforks raised. Led by the burly innkeeper Hargrove, now a redeemed ally after his own brush with suspicion, they surged into the blue room, overwhelming Crayford in a whirlwind of righteous anger. Irons clanked shut around his wrists, like the chains of justice finely forged, his curses swallowed by the storm's unrelenting roar. He was the mastermind all along, Miss Marple explained, her breath ragged but her composure unbroken. Voss's true killer, Thornwood's poisoner, architect of the hauntings. The break-in tonight? A desperate ruse to access the final jewel cache hidden beneath this very bed, using the secret passage to create an impossible crime. As constables hauled the thrashing Crayford away into the tempest, his howls fading into the wind, Miss Marple directed the villagers to the bed's undercarriage. With crowbars and lanterns they pried open a concealed panel, revealing the dank tunnel snaking into the moor's depths. At its far end, amid cobwebs and forgotten relics, the last of Voss's hoard scarabs and amulets glowing with an unholy, toxic allure, coated in ancient hallucinogens that had driven men to madness and self-destruction. Dawn broke over, Eldridge Hollow like a warrior's blade cleaving the night, its golden rays banishing the lingering shadows of terror. Willowmere Cottage stood purged at last, its secrets laid bare to the light of truth. Miss Marple, victorious yet weary from the night's harrowing ordeal, departed the hollow on the first train the cottage bequeathed to Clara Thornwood, the rightful heir uncovered in prior revelations, back in the tranquil embrace of St. Mary Mead. Amid blooming roses and the gentle hum of village life, Miss Marple resumed her knitting by the fireside, each stitch a meditative weave of calm from chaos. But her sharp blue eyes gleamed with undimmed vigilance, reflecting on how a single night of terror had unraveled a tapestry of deceit spanning decades. Terror, she mused, wasn't born of curses or ghosts, but from the blackened hearts of men consumed by greed's insatiable hunger. Mysteries would always beckon from the shadows, and her needle stood ever ready to pierce their veil, drawing forth the brilliant thread of justice. Chapter 11. The Portrait on the Wall. In the oppressive twilight of Willowmere Cottage, where shadows clawed at the edges of reality like desperate fingers from the grave, Miss Jane Marple's gaze locked onto the faded portrait hanging sentinel over the cursed bed in the blue room. The young woman's eyes, eerily lifelike, piercing through layers of dust, and time seemed to follow her every move, a silent guardian or perhaps a vengeful spectre. Her story, long entombed in forgotten whispers, pulsed with unspoken horrors that threatened to unravel the fragile threads of sanity Miss Marple had clung to since inheriting this den of deceit from the poisoned Professor Thornwood. As lightning flickered outside, illuminating the portrait's pallid face in ghostly flashes, Miss Marple felt a chill slither down her spine. This was no mere painting, but a key to the abyss. The portrait depicted a woman in her prime, clad in Victorian lace that cascaded like frozen waterfalls, her raven hair coiled in elegant defiance. But those eyes, almond-shaped, brimming with sorrow and secrets, held a magnetism that bordered on the supernatural. Miss Marple, her knitting needles paused mid-stitch like poised daggers, traced the frame's gilded edges, feeling faint etchings beneath the grime. "Who were you?" she murmured, her voice slicing the heavy silence. The air thickened with lavender's cloying perfume, a harbinger of the terrors that had plagued her. Whispers after midnight, the poisoned teacup, the break-in that unmasked Crayford's treachery. Now this enigmatic visage beckoned her deeper into Willowmere's venomous heart. Compelled by curiosity's iron grip, Miss Marple delved into Thornwood's cluttered study, a chaos of occult tomes and alchemicovials that reeked of forbidden knowledge. Amid yellowed letters and crumbling ledgers, she unearthed a faded journal, its pages brittle as autumn leaves. The entries, scrawled in elegant script, belonged to Lady Arabella Voss, Sir Reginald Voss's sister, vanished alongside him 15 years prior. The portrait watches, one passage hissed. Her eyes see all betrayals, murders, the curse that devours. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. Arabella had painted it herself, capturing the likeness of Eliza Hawthorne, the original builder's daughter, whose tragic fate birthed Willowmere's legends. Eliza's story exploded from the pages like a suppressed scream. Born in 1789, she was a beauty ensnared and greed-swept betrothed to a ruthless suitor who coveted her family's hidden fortune, jewels smuggled from Egyptian tombs laced with deadly toxins. On her wedding gift, Eliza discovered his plot, poison in her bridal cup, prussic acid to mimic a lover's faint. She fled to the blue room, locking herself in, but the fiend, her own brother, twisted by avarice, broke through, forcing the venom down her throat. As life ebbed, she clawed at the walls, her final gaze fixed on the mirror, etching her agony into eternity. The portrait, commissioned posthumous Libby, a guilt-ridden servant, captured that moment, eyes alive with accusation. Forever watching the bed where she died. Miss Marple's hands trembled as connection signated like fireworks in her mind. The cursed bed wasn't haunted by spirits, but by echoes of Eliza's murder-staged deaths mimicking her strangulation. The lavender, her favorite scent, now a mask for poison. Crayford, Thorne, Hawthorne, all descendants or accomplices in a bloodline of betrayal, guarding the jewels buried beneath. But the portrait, it held a secret, its frame humming faintly under her touch dot as night descended like a guillotine's blade. The cottage awoke with malevolent fury. Wings howled through cracks like banshees in torment, rain lashing windows in relentless assault. Miss Marple returned to the blue room, lantern casting grotesque shadows that danced mockingly. The portrait's eyes gleamed, almost luminous, drawing her closer. With a hairpin she pried the frame loose, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, a locket, engraved with Eliza's initials, containing a miniature etched on vellum, pinpointing the jewel's crypt beneath the floorboards, but triumph shattered like glass under boot. A creak stealthy, predatory from the hall. Miss Marple whirled, heart thundering, as the door burst open. A cloaked figure lunged, dagger flashing like lightning. "The map's mine," snarled a voice muffled by rage. They grappled in the gloom, furniture crashing like avalanches. Miss Marple's umbrella parried the blade, but the assailant revealed as Clara Thornwood. The rightful heir she'd trusted pressed on with feral strength. "You!" Miss Marple gasped, dodging a swipe that sliced her sleeve. "Clara poisoned teacup, break-ins, Elia?" Clara's laugh was a venomous cackle. "Eliza was my ancestress. The jewels cursed my line hallucinations, madness. I staged it all, Crayford my pawn, Thorne my kin. You inherit? I and you claim it." She thrust again, but Miss Marple sidestepped, toppling the portrait. It crashed onto Clara, frame splintering, the map fluttering free. Villagers, alerted by her wired bell, storm Eden, subduing the howling woman. Clara confessed in a torrent. She'd forged Thule, murdered Thornwood, revived Eliza's method to perpetuate the curse myth. The portrait's eyes, optical illusion painted with reflective pigments to watch intruders, guarding the secret. Dawn banished the shadows, jewels unearthed, toxic relics destroyed. Willowmere, exorcised, became a museum of mysteries. Miss Marple departed, portrait in tow as a memento. In St. Mary Mead it hung benignly, eyes now at peace. But in quiet moments she wondered, did forgotten stories ever truly die? Chapter 12. The Poisoned Teacup. In the stifling hush of Willowmere Cottage's sun-dappled tea-room, where dust mote test-whirled like conspiratorial whispers, Miss Jane Marple lifted the delicatessen teacup to her lips only to freeze, her senses exploding with alarm. These tea carried a faint, acrid tang beneath the chamomile's soothing veil, a scent that clawed at memories buried deep in her steel-trapped mind. Poison. Her heart hammered like a war drum as she set the cup down with figned nonchalance, her blue eyes scanning the room for the serpent in her midst. This was no accident. It was a brazen assassination attempt, cloaked in hospitality's guise. And worse, the method screamed of a notorious crime from decades past, one that had chilled England to its core. The afternoon had begun innocently enough, or so it seemed in this cursed hollow of Eldridge Moor. Fresh from the nightmarish break-in that unmasked Inspector Crayford as the master puppeteer of murder and deceit, Miss Marple had sought solace in routine. The villagers, now allies forged in the fire of revelation, had descended with offerings, scones from the baker, jams from the widow Hargrove, and tea brewed by the seemingly meek vicar, Reverend Silas Thorne. "To steady your nerves, dear lady," he'd cooed, his eyes gleaming with false piety as he poured the steaming liquid. But now, as the cup cooled untouched, Miss Marple's instincts roared. This was the Blackwood poisoning all over again, a scandal from 1895, where a scheming heir laced his aunt's tea with prussic acid, the cyanide's almond whisper betraying the deed to a vigilant guest. "Prussic acid," she murmured, her voice a razor slicing the tension. The room's shadows seemed to deepen, the lavender's scent ever-present harbinger of doom thickening like fog rolling off the moors. She rose swiftly, her sensible shoes whispering across the Persian rug, and darted to the kitchen. There, amid the clutter of Thornwood Saltcheckle relics, she snatched a vial of silver nitrate from his abandoned lab. A drop in the tea turned the liquid murky confirmation. Cyanide, swift and merciless, designed to stop her heart mid-sip. But who? And why resurrect a method from that infamous trial, where the poisoner swung from the gallows after a maid's keen nose saved the day? She prepared meticulously, wiring a hidden bell to the vicarage, stashing knitting needles like stilettos beneath the pillow, and dousing the linens with a harmless antidote to counter hallucinogens. "Come, you phantoms of flesh," she murmured, slipping into the sheets as dusk bled into night. The mattress cradled her like a coffin, its springs creaking omens. Lavender choked the air, thick as deceit, while winds howled outside like banshees demanding sacrifice. Miss Marple feigned sleep, her senses razor-sharp. Waiting for midnight's revelation, the clock struck 12 like a guillotine's fall, the chimes vibrating through her bones. Suddenly the room plunged into arctic chill, frost rimming the windows in fractal claws. Whispers slithered from the walls guttural. Accusatory, betrayer, thief, ... shadow skullist at the bed's foot, forming a spectral woman in Victorian gown, her neck bruised purple, eyes blazing with unearthly fire. Eliza Hawthorne, the first victim risen from ashes. Miss Marple's pulse exploded, but her men clamped down. Illusion or truth? The apparition pointed, mouth agape in silent scream as the bed trembled like a beast awakening. Floorboards groaned, and from beneath erupted a hidden mechanism, gears whirring like infernal machinery. The base split open, revealing a secret compartment, a vault of glittering jewels, scarabs pulsing with toxic glow. But horror escalated, a hand, flesh and blood, thrust from the darkness, clutching a syringe glinting with death's promise. "You meddling hag," snarled Reverend Thorne, emerging from the crawl space like a demon burst from hell. His facet twisted in madness's grip, clerical robes torn and muddied. "The bed secret mine. Eliza's curse? My ancestors' invention, vents for smoke, ducts for peasant fumes. I killed them all Thornwood, Blackwood, Vost, to guard Theord." Miss Marple rolled aside, the syringe embedding in the pillow with a hiss. "Your trap springs mine," she countered, yanking the bell cord. Alarms clamored, but Thorne lunged again, his strength fueled by desperation's fire. They grappled atop the bed, jewels scattering like cursed stars. Thorne's fingers clamped her throat, squeezing like the noose of fate. Visions assaulted her hallucinogens from the gems. Eliza's fire, Blackwood's convulsions, but Miss Marple jabbed a needle into his arm, drawing blood's crimson protest. Doors crashed below. Footsteps thundered. Hargrove and constables burst in, lanterns blazing like avenging suns. Thorny howled as irons clamped his wrists, his confessions spilling like venom, the bed's mechanisms built by Eliza's brother after her murder. Fire through vents for her, poison gas for others. I revived it, staged the curse to claim the fortune. But midnight's true change exploded. From Thivo crawled Clara Thornwood, coughing, a live thorn's captive, forced to forge wills. He held me prisoner. She gasped, eyes wide with terror. Grimshaw, too, emerged from shadows outside, snared by villagers, Thorn's accomplice. Now betrayed. Everything shifted. The curse dismantled, not supernatural but mechanical malice. The jewels' toxins, ancient preservatives, weaponized by killers. Miss Marple, victorious amid chaos, revealed the bed's final secret, a lever sealing the vault. Eliza's escape she never reached. Dawn banished the night. Willowmere purged. Thorn and Grimshaw hanged in justice's noose. Clara redeemed. Miss Marple departed, the bed burned to ashes. In St. Mary Mead she knitted, musing, midnight's veil lifts truth that daylight fears. Chapter 17. The bed that finally slept, in the golden embrace of dawn, where Willowmere Cottage stood like a vanquished beast, tamed by truth's relentless blade. Miss Jane Marple surveyed the blue room with a victor's quiet triumph. The cursed bed, once a monstrous relic carved with leering gargoyles, its canopy drooping like a vulture's wings, now lay dismantled. Its mahogany bones stacked like kindling in the courtyard, stripped of malice. The air, once choked with lavender's acceptive perfume, and the stench of betrayal, breathed clean at last, kissed by Moor's crisp breeze. Eldridge Hollow, purged of its ghosts, exhaled peace for the first time in centuries. Yet as Miss Marple packed her suitcase, tucking a sprig of lavender among her neatly folded tweeds, her lips curled by an knowing smile, a final secret nestled close. A memento of mysteries slain, the cottage had been a crucible of terror when she arrived, inherited from the poisoned Professor Thornwood, whose death had unravelled a tapestry of murder, poisoned teacups, staged hauntings, and a bed that killed twice, first with fire's infernal chokehold, then digitalis vanus whisper. Eliza Hawthorne's portrait, with its accusing eyes, had watched over decades of deceit, arson, poison, blackmail, all woven into the myth of a cursed bed. Reverend Thorne's confessions, Clara's redemption, and Grimshaw's downfall had shattered the conspiracy, exposing the jewel's toxicology as the root of greed's carnage. The bed's mechanisms, vents for smoke, ducts for poison, were dismantled. Its secrets burned to ash in a village bonfire that lit the night like a phoenix's rebirth. Miss Marple stepped into the blue room one last time, her sensible shoes echoing on floorboards scoured clean of muddy footprints and bloodstains. The walls, once pulsing with whispers after midnight, stood silent, their secrets exorcised. Sunlight poured through thinno-unbarred windows, gilding the space where the bed had reigned as executioner. She traced the spot where the hidden vault had yielded its cursed scarabs, their hallucinogenic glow destroyed under her orders. Clara Thornwood, the rightful heir, now owned Willowmere, her heart healed by justice's balm. The jewels' proceeds, cleansed of their poison, funded a school, a hospital, a village reborn from ashes of avarice. Yet peace was hard won. Miss Marple's mind flickered to the nights of terror, the break-in that unmasked Crayford's treachery, the attic letters exposing Eliza's forbidden love, the vicarage tea where A hidden key unlocked truth. Each clue had been a spark in the dark, kindling her resolve to face the abyss. The lavender, once a harbinger of death, now symbolized victory, a scent she'd mastered, like the mystery Esthumsville's. She plucked a sprig from a vase Clara had set out, its purple petals vibrant against the morning light, and slipped it into her suitcase. A reminder, she murmured, that even poison can bloom into peace. As she crossed the threshold, villagers gathered, their faces radiant with gratitude. Hargrove, the burly innkeeper, tipped his cap, his scars softened by redemption's glow. "Ye've saved us, miss," he rumbled, voice thick with awe. "The bed sleeps forever, no more nightmares." Clara, eyes glistening, pressed a locket into her hand Eliza's, salvaged from the vault, its miniature map, now a relic of a Kersoindone. "Keep it," Clara whispered. "You gave me back my home." Miss Marple smiled, her expression a fortress of secrets. "Homes are only as safe as the hearts within," she replied, her words carrying the weight of battles fought in silence. The train whistle pierced the air, summoning her back to St. Mary Mead's tranquil embrace. As she boarded, the hollow receded, its thatched roofs gleaming under a sky washed clean of storm clouds. Willowmere stood sentinel, no longer a beast, but a monument to truth's triumph. On the rattling train, Miss Marple opened her knitting bag, the lavender sprig tucked beside her needles like a trophy from a war won. Her thoughts drifted to the bed's final sleep, its mechanisms exposed, its victims avenged. Eliza's fiery death, Blackwood's poisoned heart, Thornwood's staged strangulation, all orchestrated by human greed, not spectral wrath. The sprig's scent wafted, a whisper of the hollow's darkness now tamed. She recalled the midnight trap she'd set, lying in that bed to lure Thorn, the gears whirring beneath like a devil's heartbeat. That night had changed everything, proving the curse a machine of murder, not magic dot in St. Mary Mead. As dusk painted her cottagine hues of rose and gold, Miss Marple sat by her fire, needles clicking like a metronome of justice. The lavender rested on her table, a silent sentinel beside Eliza's locket. Mysteries, she mused, were like beds luring the unwary, but yielding to those who dared look beneath. Her smile widened, knowing Thehalau's peace was her craft. Woven from threads of courage and cunning, another case beckoned somewhere, its shadows waiting to be pierced by her rune-yielding light, so the story closed.